If you think mastering n8n means learning everything from scratch, think again. Most people spend weeks trying to figure out n8n, only to get stuck and frustrated. The truth is, you don't need to learn everything. There's a surprising shortcut that lets you automate anything without the overwhelm. I'm Ahmed, and through Fiction AI, where we build 5-figure automation systems for clients, and through Builders Lab, where we help over 100 members build automations that actually work for them, all using these core principles. This video, I'll show you how to master n8n using these 7 essential building blocks step by step. You will see how to structure workflows, solve real problems, and connect everything seamlessly. By the end, you'll have full confidence to approach any automation like a pro and build powerful workflows on your own. Stick around, because once you see this method in action, you wonder why nobody taught it this way. Let's dive in. So, getting straight into the action. How does every workflow start? They all start with a trigger node, and there are 3 basic types of ways you can start a workflow. The first one is using the when click execute workflow. Basically, whenever you're building something new in n8n, start with a manual trigger. It's like your play button. It lets you test your workflows instantly without waiting for real data, and you use this all the time when you're experimenting. Let me quickly show you. So I have a test data here. It's already here, but let's paste the image you can see here. And just think of it like when you click on this button here, it basically starts the workflow. Or you can click on execute workflow here and it starts it. You can add, for example, a set node here, and you can put name here. Here, pass on the country, delete. Cool. So you can see if I click on this, basically initiates the workflow. So if you click on this, it basically starts the workflow. Next one we have is the schedule trigger. Let's say you want to run your workflow automatically, even when you're not here. That's when the schedule trigger workflow comes into play. You tell it when to run, whether that be every day, every hour, every Monday, and it just happens based on the timeline that you've set for it. If you open it right here, you can see the days interval, which basically, if you want your workflow to run every second or every minute, every hour, or on some specific days, weeks, months, or fully custom, then you can set, let's say if you choose days, you want the days between the trigger. If you want 2 days between the trigger, that would be, let's say for example, you want the trigger to start on Monday, and then 2 days, which is Tuesday and Wednesday, it's not gonna run. Then Thursday, it's gonna run again. And you can put the hour, whether you want it to run midnight, 1 a.m., you get the logic. And trigger at minute 2 as well, so you can put the hour and minutes here. So that is how this schedule trigger workflow works. Now we have the webhook. This is where things is real, because with this you can build real-time automations. The webhook trigger basically just listens for incoming data from outside. Outside could be, let's say for an example, your Lovable frontend. If you've seen one of my walkthroughs before, you've probably seen how I use Lovable as my frontend, which sends my input data from my frontend over to my backend, and how my backend receives that is using this webhook node. So think of it like this. A new lead fills out a form. A payment goes through, or someone sends data to your system. That event hits this webhook and boom, your automation basically starts upon receiving that request. Let me show you an example using an API testing platform. So let's go into the webhook node. Let's make here a post request and let's just listen for event here. So you want to copy this, want to go over here and you want to paste it, and you also have a JSON body here. So what we're going to do is that we're just going to send it over, and then we can see a response saying workflow has started. If we go to our n8n, we can see that we've just received the data, which means the workflow can then begin upon receiving this data. So Hopefully this gives you a more clearer understanding of how the webhook node moves. So now our workflows knows when to start, how to start it, the trigger, if you're going to use the click button trigger, whether you're going to use this time schedule trigger, or if you're going to use a webhook based on real-time data. So the next step is basically figuring out, where do you take the data that you get? Where do you store it? Or even if you want to retrieve the data from a database, how do you do that? That's what we'll cover next in the data input and storage. So the first node we have in section 2 is a Google Sheets node, because most workflows need to pull data from somewhere. Here's a simple example. This is a Google Sheet with leads in it, a number of leads in it, about 3. We'll read to see the existing leads, and later we can write new leads into this Google Sheet when data comes in, let's say maybe from a webhook node, something like that. So just think of the Google Sheets like a database. You store your data there and you can fetch your data there. For context, here's the Google Sheet. You can see there over 3 leads here. We have 3 leads. And what we're going to do now using this node is that we're going to fetch. We're basically going to fetch and retrieve the data from the Google Sheet. So if you click on this execute step here, you can see here, basically fetch 3 items. If you go into the table, we can see all of the needs as like we can see them in the Google Sheets interface, but over here we have them over the n8n workflow, which means we can use the data for processing. So that is how we fetch data. Sometimes you want a database like a tool with a friendly UI. That's what Airtable basically is. Same idea. You can fetch data, you can store data there, and you can keep it ready for automations like this. So it's basically the same concept as this Google Sheet node, but here we're just using a different platform, which is Airtable. Sometimes you don't want to use an external app. n8n has this new feature they call the data tables. It's like a mini database in your workflow. You can store data temporarily or permanent data for later on. So let me show you how that works. So here what we're going to do is I'm going to get this node here. Let's use this click to execute, and let's hook it up with this. Get this workflow here. We're going to get this data, and what we're going to do is that we're going to add this to the database. Country. First, let's open up the database here. You can see here it's currently empty. Just give it some time. You can see there are no rules, so it's currently empty. We go back, and if we execute on this step, we can see it returned that it has been created at this specific time, and all these data points have been added to the n8n data tables. And if we click on refresh, we can see, voila, the row has been added. So that is basically how you fetch and add things to your database so that you can use them in your workflow. Great. Now we can fetch and store data. Next, we need to decide what to do with it, which leads us to the logic and control flow nodes. So the first node we have in the logics and control flow section is an if-else statement, because here's an example. Not every lead is the same. With the if node, we can decide, should we email this need, ignore it, or do something else with the need. It's simple. You basically set a condition and n8n will send the data down the right path. Let me show you an example. So let's get this click to execute node we have here. Scroll data. Okay, so let's get it here. Let's connect it up with this. I will make an if-else statement. So we'll basically just say if lead score. So the whole thought process of this is that we want to only email leads with a score higher than 80. If it's lower than 80, which means in our opinion they are not qualified. If they're above 80, they are qualified. So we're going to use this if-else node to apply that concept or logic into our n8n workflow. So we'll put if lead score number is equal to sorry, is greater than 80, it basically means it's true. So we can see the lead here has a lead score of 68, which means by default, or should I say based on our reasoning, this lead is not qualified, so it's gonna take us to the false path. So let's click on this and see where it takes us. Now you can see it took us to the false branch, which is correct. So that is how the if node works. Up next we have the switch node. So with the switch node, sometimes one condition isn't enough. The switch node lets you branch into multiple paths based on one field. For example, different countries or lead sources or priorities. But this example will be using different countries. But you could also use lead sources. Let's say you generate leads from Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. So you want to basically segment and see where the leads are from. So maybe for your TikTok leads, there's going to be a certain workflow that to be done. For your Facebook leads, there needs to be a certain workflow that to be done. You can replicate that using the switch node. The difference with the if-else node is that if-else node gives us only one condition, but the switch node, we are able to add multiple conditions for one variable basically. So if we go over here, we click here, we click on the switch node here, we connect them up. Then let's basically put country. If this, basically this is equals to Germany, is equal to the United Kingdom from United Kingdom. Okay, the step, it should take us to the Germany branch, which is lead is from Germany, which I've probably done it the correct way. Now, the loop over items node. Sometimes you have lots of leads and you don't want to process them on at once. What this does is that it lets you handle small chunks at a time, and it's useful for emails, APIs, or big workflow. Let me show you with this lead example. So let's delete this and let's hook it up with this Sheets node here we have here, because we're going to be receiving more than one lead. So always use this when you have more than one data. So if we go into our Google Sheet, you can see there's one lead, 2, 3. And what we're going to do is that we're going to categorize them based on their lead score, run again the qualified leads based on what we retrieved from our database. So if you go to n8n, we're going to connect this get rules sheet with this loop over items. And what we're going to do here is that we're going to use this if else node. I know there's a lot of nodes moving around, but I'm gonna make it simplified for you. So you can see here what it does is that first it gets the row, then it loops over each item. So let me run this so that I can show you. So you can see here we have 3 items. So what it's gonna do is that it's gonna loop over this first item, second item, and the third one, step by step. So once it takes one, so you can see here it takes one item. So as you can see here, it takes one item, which is the first item, and then we categorize it. Basically said this lead is not qualified because his lead score is lower than 75. So that's basically the whole concept of this loop over item. You can just loop over all these 3 items and just finish it up and categorize them at once instead of creating 3 different nodes, because that is how you would have to do it if you're not using this loop over item node. Now we know how to filter and branch data and also loop data. Next, we'll clean it, format it, and that is where the data transformation nodes come in. And the first one we have the set field node, because sometimes data isn't ready to use. Maybe the field names are inconsistent, or you just want a few key fields. The set node lets you pick, rename, or create new fields. Think of it as shaping the data before sending it forward over to the next node. And the example we're going to use for this would be, let's get one here using this click tag. Oh my god, keep to me out. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's click on this edit field, and all we're going to do is that we're going to add another variable to this set of data points that we have for this specific lead. Now we want to know if this lead has been attended to by our sales team, especially by our in-house sales team. So just a quick way to do this, just put the name, status, then when I add pending, because we haven't added a node that will basically notify the team. So we're gonna add pending, and if we execute the node, we can see it just added a new status column, because before it didn't have any. We were to go into the table view, we would see it didn't have any, but now it has. That is basically how the set field node works. Now the function node is basically where you get technical. You can write mini scripts to manipulate data exactly how you want. You can combine fields, you can calculate values, or transform data on the fly. Think of it as just your code playground. You can code whether in Python or JavaScript depending on the programming language you would like. Even if you're not a developer, you can use small snippets to tackle tricky data problems. This node is powerful for customizing workflows, and you can even use AI like ChatGPT or Cloud to generate JavaScript code if needed, or Python code depending on what you prefer. And the example we're going to use for this is that we're going to transform the lead data we have been using in all the other examples. So you can see here in the lead data, we have the information like this. Sometimes the lead might not input their name in like uppercase, sometimes or lowercase. So what we're going to do is that we're going to make sure that the first name is like the name has uppercase, the country has uppercase, and after that we're going to put it all in one sentence instead of having it in different columns, because all these are individual on their own. We don't have them in a sentence, because sometimes when we want to send data, let's say for example to our sales team, we want to have it in a sentence form, because they just want to read it and get the lead data before they call them, not seeing it in like tables and stuff like that. So we're going to paste our code here. They're going to hook it up with this and just click on execute, and you can see here it perfectly just ran the code. So what the code does, as I said, it puts the name to uppercase, and then for the full info, it basically takes the name, the country, the lead score, and puts it all into one sentence, which you can see here. So to go to our schema, we would see it here, because before this did not exist. Only these 4 key data points existed, but now we have over 5. So hope you get the logic with that. So up next we have the split out node. So let's say you have multiple leads in one workflow, and you might want to handle them simultaneously. Unlike looping in batches, this runs all items at once, making it faster. For API calls, however, I would recommend you use the split in batches, because it is recommended so that you would avoid rate limits, encountering rate limit errors when you're making API call. So the example we're going to use for this is that we're going to create an array of leads. So you can see we have an array of leads, and it's all one item here. That's the most important thing. So, and you want to split it out into 3 items, like how basically this Google Sheet works. If, for example, let's say, because if you fetch data, It gives it to you in 3 items. So let's say we want to transform it from 1 item. We have an array in 1 item, but we want to turn it into 3 items. So we use the split out node to basically split the items, 1 items, into 3 different items, like how it is in the array. So let's execute this step. Let's open it and let's drag this, which is the name of the array. You can see this item 1 in the array, item 2, and item 3. If we execute this step, we'll see now we have 3 items. You can see Sarah Lee, Alex Carter, and Emily Wu. We have 3 items, and before we just had 1 item. Now we can use this for looping batches, or we can use this to execute nodes, but then how it would execute is that it wouldn't execute all of them together. Each of these leads will be executed independently. So if we go to this JavaScript node and we were to run it, see here it did it independently for each lead, for example. So you can see it did it for Sarah Lee, it did it for Alex Carter and Eminem. So that's basically how it works. So now the aggregates. Sometimes you need to combine multiple items into a single object. Let's say, for example, from 3 items down to 1 item, the reverse of basically what this split out node does. The aggregate items lets you do this. For example, putting all emails into one list for batch processing. So now let's basically take these 3 items and bring it back into 1 item. Basically the reverse of what we've done. Just think of the situation as, okay, we want to basically create full info for each lead. Once we're done doing that, we want to bring it back into 1 item. So we can use this aggregates node. And let's bring everything into 1 list, and let's call let's just call it needs. And if we execute the workflow, you can see it brings everything back into 1 item here, which is basically what we started with over here. So that is basically how the aggregate works. Now our data is clean, structured, and ready. Next up, we'll send it to other tools, which welcomes you to the connectivity and API nodes section. Starting first, we have the HTTP request, which is one of the most important, because sometimes we need to send our data to another app that doesn't have a built-in node. By a built-in node, I basically mean this. Let's say we want to send data to Google Sheets. You can basically just set up Google Sheets and send it using the nodes n8n have made for Google Sheets themselves. So these are supported by the n8n dev team. But what if you want to send data to an application that is not yet supported by n8n? So that is what this HTTP request does. The HTTP request is like a universal connector. You can call any API with it. You can even call the Google Sheets if you don't want to use the n8n Google Sheets, but I would recommend you doing that because it just makes the building process faster and managing everything faster for you and easier. So think sending leads into a CRM or posting to Slack or updating a database. You can use this to basically send data into other applications, because the way applications communicate with each other is through an API interface. So you send data from one API to another using this HTTP request node. And how we're going to test this HTTP request node is basically by creating a mock server. It's similar to the API testing tool we use, but this time we're using the webhook.site, which provides us with a unique endpoint that we can send a data to basically on the receiving end. For example, with n8n, it could be your webhook node, which receives the data. But in this part, we're going to create a mock server and we're going to send a request to it. And all we're going to send is basically, get this data here, connect it up with this, and what we're gonna send a JSON body with name. Let's send email and country to parent up being to up the core. So what's going to happen now is that this webhook URL, or should I say this endpoint, will basically be receiving the data that we're going to be sending here. So you can even send it using a JSON body like we passed it on here. So we can, all you can just do is that you can just copy this if you want to, instead of using a body here where we can just fill it out using these fields. We can just using JSON, just fill it out, and if we execute, we can see this URL has no default config, whatever. But then if we check, we can see that we've basically received the data that we sent from the front end. So that is how the HTTP request. You can imagine using this to send data to your CRM on top like that. Up next, we have the respond to webhook node. So if, for example, your workflow was triggered by a webhook, we can send a response back to the source system, and this confirms basically the data was received or processed successfully basically. And you can also use this to send back data that is meant to be processed. Let's say, for example, you have a content repurposing system. The n8n workflow processes, let's say, takes in a YouTube video URL, and at the end it basically produces 5 different LinkedIn posts. So it repurposes the YouTube video into 5 different LinkedIn posts. So the process for that maybe could be, okay, we're going to transcribe the YouTube video, and after that we're going to pass it to an OpenAI LLM model, which I'll be showing you in the next node group, how that works. Then once we basically use an LLM node to basically take that transcription and turn it into 5 different LinkedIn posts, and then at the receiving end, it's basically going to output the 5 different LinkedIn posts. So imagine it in a front-end system. You basically paste in your video URL, you send it back to your backend, which is your n8n workflow. Your n8n workflow processes it, and then it returns the 5 different posts. So we use this respond to webhook to basically respond back to the webhook that was made, or should I say the API call that was made on the front end, like how it is in most of my workflow examples if you watch them. So, and how we're going to test this is using the same API testing tool that we use to test this webhook mode here. And how we're going to see if it works is that we want to keep an eye on the response body here. We just want to make sure that this message value here says workflow completed, because that is what we put here. And now what we're going to do now is that we're going to set it all. So we're going to make it post request. Then you want to listen for metadata, copy, paste our level URL here, make it a post request here too as well, and just send it. Then since what we're doing is that we're not triggering the actual workflow, what we're actually doing is testing to see if we would receive the data. So it wouldn't respond, but if we were to click on this node, but it has already closed the API call, so we wouldn't be able to receive it. But what we'll do is that we'll send back this response body which says workflow completed. So that is basically how these two pairs work. Use the webhook mode, and then when you want to send back data at the end, that you use the respond to webhook mode for that. But now our workflows can talk to other apps automatically. Next, we'll make it smarter with the AI and automation node section, things like scoring leads and summarizing info. And that is what we have this AI agent node for. Because sometimes you want your workflow to think for you. The AI agent node lets you do that. You give a simple instruction, it handles the requests like summarizing or scoring leads, and it also has memory for chat conversations, back and forth chat conversations. It also has the ability for you to add tools to it. And how we're going to test this is just by using the conversational feature. But if you're going to go in depth, you can add memory and tools like I have said. But I'm going to show you one tool feature that's really good, so that you can replicate a reasoning model, because this AI agent can also reason, take actions, and do normal AI input output conversation like you do with ChatGPT. So all you do is connect it up with the chat model. You can see you can connect it up with the Anthropic models, Azure models, the DeepSeek models. You can see most are available. All we're going to do is that we're going to choose the Open Router, because Open Router, it's a software that gives you a unified interface for accessing almost all LLMs. And the interface is like unified. So like the endpoint is always similar. All you have to do is just create an account, fund that account, and you can access multiple LLM. So you don't have to create separate accounts for, let's say, if you're going to use the Gemini 2.5 Pro, you're going to need to create a Google account. If you're going to use the GPT-5, you're going to create an OpenAI account. If you're going to use the Cloud Sonnet 4.5, you need to create an Anthropic account. You can see it gets quite complicated. So what this software does is that it helps you create an all-in-one account. Basically, you can access any API you want through the endpoint. And if we were to go to their models, you can see the list is quite endless. But what we're going to choose is going to choose a GPT-5, and you want to hook it up with an executor node. So let's find this execute node here. When I tell it to do is that, well, then basically summarize this lead data row, and provide with the lead data we get. Country, and you also have the lead score. And if we were to execute this step, just gonna give it some time, because when you're making API requests to LLM models, it takes quite some time, because normally with ChatGPT, it doesn't just give you the output instantly. It takes some time. So you can see here, it just summarized that. I basically gave us names, this, lead scoring and everything, prioritizing, follow-up and stuff like that. Just normally how you would speak with ChatGPT. And you can add the memory by basically clicking at simple memory and choosing the session of the conversation, and also adding how many of the past conversations should be included for memory, so that the AI agent can have context of the past things that were said in the conversation. And you can also add other memory softwares like Redis, Postgres, MongoDB and stuff like that. But for the basics, you just want to stick with the simple memory, and basically what n8n gives you. It's quite simple to use and it gets most of your job done, so you don't need to use any of that. So you can see tools here. Just think of tools as actions the AI agent can do, basically. And that's what basically makes it an AI agent. It can call other n8n workflows. So it can basically execute another n8n workflow on its behalf, basically, or should I say on your behalf. And you can also add vector stores for creating a RAG pipeline, which is basically training an AI model on, let's say, your company docs and stuff like that. So the tool that I was telling you about, so that you can replicate the way other reasoning models think, that n8n has integrated for us here in that the n8n team has integrated for all over here in n8n as this thing tool. So you can pass this thing tool to your AI agent, and it actually thinks. And the model that we're using is not even a reasoning model, it's just GPT-5. You can even use GPT-5 mini. Here, you can make a reason, or should I say think, using this thing tool. So now, our workflows isn't just automated, it's smart. Next, we'll make sure it's stable, reusable, and error-proof with the utility and support nodes. For the first one is the execute workflow. And the whole point of this is because big workflows can get extremely messy if everything lives in one workflow. And the execute workflow node lets you break automations into smaller and reusable pieces. Think of it as calling a mini workflow from the main workflow, like I explained with the AI agent calling your call it another workflow. So just think of it like this. And why this is great is that, first of all, it makes your workflow modular, which makes it easy for formatting, scoring, or notification logic all in one place. Another thing is maintainability. So you can update a sub workflow once and all the workflows that are using that sub workflow change. So you don't need to basically go into each workflow update. So just update the sub workflow and that's it. Reusability too as well. So you can call the same workflow multiple times from the main workflow without duplicating steps. So everything is done in a well-structured manner. And the way you can set up the execute workflow is just by clicking on the node itself and just select a node and just select a workflow. So let's just choose a self-learning agent. So we can trigger the self-learning agent from this workflow. And you can also add this as an important option where you tell it to wait for sub workflow completion. If you know you do not need the data back from the sub workflow, maybe let's say you're just delegating a task to that sub workflow, you don't need the data back. You can just click this off and it doesn't wait for the sub workflow to complete. It just continues with the execution, which is going to save you a lot of time. I explained this in the self-learning agent video. After that, we have the error trigger. Workflows sometimes fail. Maybe an API goes down or a data is missing. The error trigger basically catches these failures so you can notify your team or handle them automatically. After that, we have the wait node. As I showed you an example with the AI agent node, it's not as instant as other HTTP requests, or should I say non-LLM HTTP requests. So the APIs or apps often have rate limits, and sending too many requests at once can break your workflow, and instead of receiving a 200 success code, you basically receive an error success code which would break your workflow. So the wait or delay node basically pauses an execution for a set time between the actions so that you wouldn't encounter a rate limit. And the way the wait node works is that you just give it a time amount. You can give it 5 seconds. You can change that to minutes, which will be 5 minutes. You can give it hours, which will be 5 hours. You get the logic. And that's it. You've seen all the 7 core node types in action. You've seen the trigger node, the data input / storage node, the logic and control node, the transformation node, and then the connectivity, should I say the API node, and also the AI node, which makes your workflow smart. Also, the utility and support workflows that I just showed you. What I'm going to go over now are the 5 beginner mistakes almost everybody has made in it. First of all, not planning the workflow structure. Many beginners jump straight into dragging nodes without thinking about the overall logic or the n8n workflow itself, and the result is that your workflow becomes messy, hard to debug, and sometimes executes tasks in the wrong way or manner. Always take a moment before you build the actual workflow to sketch a simple flowchart. Think triggers, conditions, and error handling before adding a single. And when saying flowchart, it's just a simple diagram that just says, okay, and this happens, this should happen next. And if this is this, okay, maybe you should go to this path or another path. Just take your time before you actually build the workflow. It's just going to take you like 30 minutes, but it's going to save you a lot more than that if you don't do that. So just take your time and actually sketch it out before you actually build the workflow. And you're going to see it's going to make building your workflow way faster. Secondly of all, overloading a single workflow. Another common mistake is trying to fit too many unrelated tasks into one workflow. Instead, what this does is that this makes execution slow, maintenance harder for you, and also a small error can break the entire chain. So instead, what you can do is split large workflows into smaller, focused sub-workflows that can call each other when needed, because as I said, modularity is always key. Third one is ignoring error handling. Beginners often assume that every node will succeed without failure, but a single API error or bad data or timeout can stop your entire workflow. always use the error trigger nodes, if nodes for validation, or try and catch patterns to handle errors gracefully, and this keeps your workflows reliable. And the fourth one is improperly setting credentials or copying workflows. Pasting workflows from external sources without properly setting credentials is a frequent mistake that most beginners make. Nodes fail because authentication is invalid, or worse, sensitive data may be exposed. Always set credentials in the n8n credentials manager and avoid hard coding your API keys directly into nodes, because it's safer and way more professional. And also, if you don't do that, if you share your workflow, your API key, since it's hard coded into the workflow, the next person that gets that workflow is going to get access to your API key, and you don't want to do that. And the fifth and final one is not using n8n evaluation nodes. Finally, many users skip evaluation nodes to test logic and data flow. Without testing, workflows may behave unpredictable in production, or says here unexpectedly in production, causing errors or unwanted actions. What you want to do is take advantage of the evaluation nodes to simulate and validate your workflow on test data before going live. I'm gonna tell you this, it saves you a lot of headache. So yeah, those are the 5, and if you avoid these 5 mistakes, which is planning your workflows, keeping your workflows modular, handling errors, managing credentials properly, and testing the evaluation nodes, so as you testing with the evaluation nodes, your n8n automations will be clean, reliable, and maintainable from the start. Alright, let's wrap up what we covered today. You know the exact system to master n8n using the 7 building blocks, and how to structure workflows that actually solve real problems, so no more guessing or wasted time. That means you can finally approach any workflow like a pro and build workflows on your own. If you want to take this even further, join the Builders Lab, which is the first link in the description below, where you will get step-by-step action guide, and on top of that you get templates, live support, so you can implement everything faster and start seeing results immediately. And if you'd like custom solutions built for your business, check out Fiction AI, which is the second link in the description below, and make an inquiry with the team and they'll get back to you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you inside the Builders Lab.